So a boil water advisory or a drinking water advisory is essentially a directive handed down by a government or a health authority with the primary intent of protecting consumers of that water source or end users from adverse health effects related to drinking or even sometimes just using their water that's coming out of their tap. So I think living under a boil water advisory, and I say this being a very fortunate person who's never had to do that myself, but from what I understand, it is quite jarring. And when you're handed down a sudden advisory notice, you have to change everything that you're doing in your everyday life. Things that you absolutely took for granted, thoughtless tasks, things that you never thought of doing before, all of a sudden become a lot more time-consuming, more cumbersome, and of course you're going to be very fearful and very confused. There's often miscommunication happens in how the message is handed down. I think generally speaking, we don't always do a great job of getting messages across about why you're coming under an advisory. Is it a very serious, potentially long-term situation, or is it just something like a blip in quality because it's spring runoff or something like that? So in the long term, these advisories tend to erode the health of the entire community. Frustration tends to manifest itself in the form of complete distrust or even disengagement in one's own community. Sometimes people just simply move away if their life is going to be so impacted by not having clean drinking water. In my very personal opinion, long-term drinking water advisories they're beyond the point of a crisis, and they're really kind of just a systematic failure and a complete tragedy for the communities that are affected by them. So the first time I ever went into a community that was under a long-term boil water advisory, it was a very rapid learning curve. I had a lot of background. I knew the situation before I went in there. I had met with various levels of government, the health authorities, and even the chief and council of this particular community. I was given all the background, all of the information that I needed. But actually driving in and seeing this very whole community, but also noticing that there was this sign, as you came in, warning about drinking that water, and it was, faded, and it was an old sign. That was jarring and certainly made me stop and think. And then you walk into the water treatment plant that's not functioning at its best, and you start talking with community members who maybe are curious as to why you're there. In my case, I was talking to the operator who had lived there his entire life. I made it through that, asking the typical engineering questions and kind of checking your boxes, taking a few pictures, shaking hands, thanking people for inviting them to your community or their community. But when I left and that started weighing on me, I think it was motivating. I want to say yes, it was an emotional thing and it was very, very heavy to see that, very humbling. But it was motivating more than anything. It just made me want to fix this injustice as I saw it, And of course, it's far more complex than that, but at a very basic level, that kind of just made everything clearer as to why I was doing what kind of work that we are doing here.